already, and one of Jeremy's fantastic characteristics is modesty. He says over and over again, this is not about me. So although this afternoon is in a way about him, what I would like to talk about is, let me remind myself, the attacks that we face and how we should be turning the tables and fighting back. Because if we go away from this evening just feeling, oh my God, you know, Jeremy's been destroyed and it's all dreadful, that would be a great shame. So, okay, well, we're facing so many attacks on so many fronts. I'll just pick out a couple. Some have already been referred to. The fact that the right to protest, the right to strike, the right to organise, the right to collective action is under threat. This is serious, comrades. This is really, really serious. There's also the question of, think about the Palestine Action people who have been challenging the Israeli arms company Elbit Systems, which has, for some extraordinary historical reason, plants around the country. Those guys, some of them are facing jail terms for their selfless, dedicated, heroic action. We've got to stand up against that sort of threat to the right to protest. Environmental activists, many of them very young, many of them very idealistic, coming into struggle for the first time. They're facing draconian measures against them. They're arrested en masse. They're dragged before the courts. We have to protest against this and find ways of rolling back the legislative attacks upon us. It's really important. We're facing attacks on freedom of expression. Now, if a democratic society means anything, it has to mean that you have the right to express views that are disliked by the people in power, and the right to express them in ways that the people in power find uncomfortable or distasteful. Otherwise, it's a meaningless right. And we've had some really serious examples of how that right is under threat. I'm wearing an armband here today. It's got little floating pigs on it. I was at Roger Waters' concert on Thursday night, and I can tell you that concert, which has been represented as if it was a sort of cesspit of hatred of Jews, was the exact opposite. It was a celebration of outrage against all forms of oppression and against anti-Semitism and against all forms of racism and discrimination. But you've all seen in the media the way Roger Waters has been treated, cancelled, or attempts to cancel him, so far unsuccessful, thank goodness. Ken Loach, a hero of our movement, somebody who is renowned throughout the world as a brilliant, he has an unparalleled body of work as an exponent of justice and resistance to oppression. As you all know, he's been expelled from the Labour Party. Not only that, the weaponization of anti-Semitism is being deployed against Ken over and over again. In Jewish Voice for Labour, we've been extremely busy in the last few days putting out statements in support of both of these fantastic people, Roger Waters and Ken Loach. We have to really fight back against these manifestations of authoritarianism and anti-democratic developments in society. So where's the opposition? Well, I mean, we haven't got much time. Jeremy may want to talk about policy, but I mean, you know that the policies that are now being proposed by this Labour leadership, the one which destroyed and replaced Jeremy, are basically that somebody's already used the word neoliberal. So we have, if we want to be in the Labour Party, we have been told explicitly, you must be pro-Israel, pro-NATO and pro-business. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think that the people from the Bakers Union, whose logo is on here, who helped to found the Labour Party back in 1903, I don't think that's quite what they had in mind when they established a party to represent working people in Parliament. So, you know, we've got that problem to face, haven't we? We've got the question within the Labour Party of the use of disciplinary procedures to eject from the party that wing which gives it its motivation to do good in the world, you know, to fight for justice. I'm expelled, 3 other of my JVL comrades are expelled. We know of at least 350 individuals who've been expelled just because they associated in some way with an organisation that the Labour leadership, in its wisdom, had decided to ban. I mean, this is McCarthyist language. It's extraordinary. Somebody pointed out earlier that they'd been terminated. I think it was Roger Silverman. You know, Daleks, my goodness, this is crazy stuff. So I mean, I'm going to put a question to you. Where is the opposition and what do we do? And I think the opposition is here. It's on the picket line with the nurses. It's in the trade unions, new and old, which are mobilising working people across the country. It's in all the campaigns in defence of refugee rights, for asylum seekers, for housing, for the right to food, the right to education, to roll back privatisation and corporate interests in our public services. All those struggles are going on. And I say to you, this is not a time for various left groups, and Ian Saville's amazing visualisation of left splits that is serious. I mean, it was hilarious when he did it, but it's serious. This is not a time for individual groups to be fighting their corner and opposing one another. We need to pull together all those threads. If you're inside the Labour Party, if you're outside the Labour Party, if you're in a housing campaign, if you're involved with one of the new left movements, work together. Don't do things that will make it, put other people in danger. We must work together. So the watchword, somebody's already said it, is solidarity, comrades. And I really look forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you very, very much. And thanks to Crispin once again.
A round of applause for Naomi Winborn-Idrissi. And our next speaker is Lindsay German from Stop the War.
Thanks very much, Crispin, and it's good to see so many people here today. I'd like to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn as something that's very, very rare, an honest politician and a principled politician. And I think when we see Boris Johnson stuffing the House of Lords with more of his mates, and when we see the way in which nearly all the MPs in Parliament lack the principles and conviction of Jeremy, we should be very, very proud that we have him as an MP and that we had him as leader of the Labour Party. When 9/11 happened in 2001, we were told we couldn't have an anti-war and peace movement. We told it would be too difficult. The events were so horrific, 3,000 people died in New York, that you wouldn't be able to demonstrate over that. We decided that probably wasn't right. And one of the first people I phoned was Jeremy Corbyn. I said, we're going to have a very big meeting in Friend's house in London. Can you come and speak at it? Jeremy never hesitated. He never asked all sorts of questions like who's going to be on the platform, what's going to be said, all this kind of thing. He said, yes, of course, it's a really serious issue of war and peace. I will be there. And in a way, if you look since then, that's 22 years ago now, Jeremy Corbyn has always been there when it comes to anti-war politics. He spoke on the biggest demonstration ever in British society against the Iraq War and for Palestine. Let's remember it was both those slogans in 2003. When they published the dossier in September 2002, we said to Jeremy, can you go down on your bike and see what this dossier says, because they get it a few hours before everybody else, the MPs. Jeremy phoned up and said, don't worry, it's nothing to worry about, they haven't got any evidence. Now, he knew that in September 2002, but Tony Blair and George Bush took us to war only a few months later with absolutely horrific consequences for everybody in the world, because they made the world a much more dangerous place. Jeremy has always been there through thick or thin, opposing these wars. He did it over Syria, he did it over Libya, he did it over Afghanistan and Iraq, and he is doing it today over Ukraine. Not because anybody in Stop the War supports what Russia is doing, but because we can see that what is happening with this war is it is going to be a worse and worse war, where the Ukrainian people are already suffering massively, but so will all sorts of other people in Europe suffer massively. And therefore the call for peace should be the absolute definite call that we make. And that call for peace has become a dirty word. You know, you're a peacemonger. Yeah, they love to throw that at Jeremy. He's a pacifist, he's got an allotment, all this kind of thing. But they're terrified of people who call for peace because they're the warmongers, they're the arms dealers, they're the people who have made our world what it is today, and they're the people. We're now looking at the possibility of nuclear war and the possibility of wars on two fronts, both in the Pacific against China and in Europe over Ukraine. I know that Jeremy will always be with us on this question, and not just on this question, over Palestine, over the Kenyan Mau Mau who were tortured and imprisoned by the British during the 1950s, over the fighting in Sudan, where many British citizens are not being allowed to come to this country because they don't give a damn about refugees who aren't white and don't fit in with their agenda. I know on all these issues and on many other issues, Jeremy Corbyn stands with us. He stands against war. He stands for justice for everybody who's fighting for liberation. He stands against the employers and the bosses. He stands in support of the strikers. To me, I hope Jeremy is going to be our MP for many years to come. And I'll just conclude by saying that I think that Keir Starmer has been an absolute disgrace in the way that he's treated him. And believe me, I think that this is not what most people in this country think of Jeremy. They know he's decent, they know he's honest. That's just what they can't stomach in the Palace of Westminster.
Round of applause for Lindsay German. Right, no, I just want to say before the main speaker comes on, I just want to say he didn't really want us to celebrate his 40th because he doesn't want it to be all about him. That is the man, and I think that is the most wonderful quality that he's got, and it attracts me to politics that there's someone like that who is like that. Now, we've heard a lot about Jeremy Corbyn today, but he's here, and I'm really pleased that he's come. So could you make as much noise as you can, like it's 2017 for Jeremy Corbyn?
Thank you, and big thank you to Crispin and all those that have put this event together here on Highbury Fields. These fields, historic, saved from developers, made a park for the people, and it's been a scene of joy, of open air local events and all kinds of things, and it's brought our communities together. And I'm very proud to have been the Member of Parliament for Islington North since 1983. If the people still wish me to continue, my services are available. Because I was first elected here in 1983, and I first came to London in the late 60s and early 1970s. Those days, it didn't feel like the greatest life on earth to be growing up and living in Britain. But by comparison to what young people face today, it was very different. We had completely free education right through to university level. We had completely free NHS. We had access to work and reasonable wages with great rapidity and speed. There was a sense of security and certainty for many young people. And you had these voices, these chattering voices in the background saying the idea of a welfare state, the idea of unemployment benefit, the idea of pensions, the idea of real social security saps the moral fibre of the nation. And what we need to do is get rid of all of that. Those siren voices that we were hearing in the popular press were the same mentality that was developing the whole idea of neoliberal economics throughout the 1970s. Reagan in California, Thatcher in Britain, Keith Joseph in Britain, and various others, and Milton Friedman in Chile where they imposed the most brutal monetarist regime on the people already being occupied by the Chilean army, having killed the government of Salvador Allende and those brilliant people. So those voices are the people that did so much to try and destroy the hopes of generations. Those voices that brought Thatcher into power in 1979, brought on the onslaught onto the coal industry, brought on the privatization of mail, rail, brought on the privatization of gas and water and electricity, and brought in all the anti-trade union laws and the public order bills to prevent demonstrations and so on. And so when you're in the midst of some of these great struggles, it isn't always obvious what the great surges of history are. But there are crucial moments in battles when you've got to pick sides. When the government of Margaret Thatcher went after the miners in 1984, she did it on the back of the 1983 election victory. I was very proud to be elected for this constituency, and I've got the manifesto I put out at that time, and I've got the maiden speech that I made in Parliament that summer, and I stand by every single word of what I said at that time. She then came after the miners, and the strike took place. It was bitter, it was long. And our community around here, most people around here have never seen a coal mine. There are obviously no mines in the area, but that sense of solidarity with the mining communities was massive. We set up the Islington Support the Miners campaign. We raised, I estimate, around £100,000 for the miners. That was an awful lot of money in 1984-85, from check-off payments for council workers and others who were donating 25 pence a week and things like that to the miners. And the government went after the miners' union, sequestered all its funds, tried to close down its operation, and so we had to then set up almost a parallel system to support the miners' families, because the government also forced legislation through Parliament, during which we stopped parliamentary proceedings by occupying the Mace to prevent it being used to put through. They were trying to put through legislation to prevent social security payments going to feed the children of miners' families. They were trying to starve them back to work. And that's why we set up this parallel system. And I've got a very vivid memory of getting the train from Finsbury Park, often do, down to King's Cross, carrying a co-op carrier bag. It was full, this co-op carrier bag, and it had some papers on top of it to disguise what was in it. I then went into the gentlemen's toilets at St Pancras Station, as you do, and I took this bag in with me into a cubicle, as you do, and I inadvertently mislaid it and left it there. The next person who went in picked up the bag and went out with it. That next person was Peter Heathfield, the General Secretary of the NUM, who took thousands of pounds in cash to Doncaster to feed the miners' families all over this country. You see, on the left, we're inventive, we're imaginative. We think these ideas, we think of these things to do. And so it is about solidarity. But it's also about our local communities around here. The battle we had to build community centres, to get parks, to save services, to try and stop the government from destroying our local council by underfunding of it. The campaign that we mounted to defend the Whittington Hospital when we discovered that the accident and emergency department was due to close. How did we find that out? Because they weren't as smart as they thought they were. They mistakenly sent me an internal email to ask my views on closing of the A&E department. They thought I was Dr. Corbyn from the pathology department. And so that's how we found out about it. And we mounted a magnificent campaign. 5,000 people marched along the Holloway Road. And you know what? We won the A&E department was saved, the Wellington Hospital was saved, and it's our hospital. And so when we campaign to defend services, that's the right and proper thing to do. Of course it is. But I'm fed up with defending everything. I'm fed up with defending services. I don't want to fight just to defend the NHS. I'll fight till my dying day to the principle of healthcare free at the point of need as a human right. I will never leave that battle, never go away from it. But I also want a national care service, because if you think about it, all of us in this park at some point will need social care, or we will know a family member who needs social care, either from profound disability, from age, infirmity, all kinds of things. They might need social care. The service is inadequate, the people delivering the service are very badly paid, access to it is very limited, and so we end up with many women giving up their lives, their jobs, their careers, their hopes in order to care for somebody, not because they don't love them, but because there's no alternative available. If we can afford a national health service, if we can afford nuclear weapons, if we can afford wars, we can afford a national care service. And we have to be bold and make these demands and make these arguments very, very clearly of the kind of world that we can live in, to raise people's hopes, which is why I feel very strongly about the way in which young people are treated in our society. In school, you have the sort of unfortunate counterposition of a deeply stressed teacher standing in a classroom in front of a class of deeply stressed children about to be tested, and the teacher about to be tested by the testers who don't test the children and test each other. So we have this whole relationship of stress in our education system. And because of the pressure of league tables and the pressure of measured achievement in schools, students get moved to different streams. Students get taken out of exam applications because they're not going to get a good grade. It might damage the state of the school within a league table. Somewhere along the line, we seem to have lost our way. Education, nursery education, preschool activities, play, interaction, social interaction between children, music, art, theatre, imagination, and all these things should be part and parcel and central to the child's experience in school and access to college. And it makes for a happier and better society, which is why I was very proud to put into our manifesto as a starting point, we would end university tuition fees. We would restore maintenance grants at university so that young people who've managed to get into university and study don't come out with a £50,000 or more debt hanging over them. So these things are so important. And that's why all the disputes and strikes we're having at the moment also bring in other things. I was talking to a group of junior doctors, ridiculous name for people that have spent 7 years getting qualifications, still be called a junior doctor, but never mind. They were telling me their concerns were about hospital management, their concerns were about pay, obviously, but their concerns were also about their own housing situation. Young doctors in hospitals in London sharing flats because they can't afford to rent a flat of their own because the rent levels are so high. And our borough council here in Islington does everything it can to build all the council housing it can. Well done, Islington. Full support for them in building council housing where they can. But every site we develop is a negotiation with a private sector developer to find out how many social rented properties we can get out of it. We have a housing crisis, we have a homelessness crisis, and we have a profit and greed crisis brought about by a government that basically empowers the developers and the speculators over local authorities and social housing provision. And so over the years we fought many battles against stock transfer and many battles to get council housing built, and I'm very pleased to see there is some new council housing becoming available. But the effects on people's lives of the housing they're in. I mean, I was doing a street advice bureau this morning. I do them quite regularly. I just go and stand on a street somewhere and see who walks by and what sort of issues they're faced with in their lives. If you're bringing up 4 children, one of whom may have disabilities, may have special needs, and you're living in a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, with the best will in the world, there's going to be stress in that family. With the best will in the world, those children are not going to be able to do the homework in the way that other children can, have got their own bedrooms, their own computer, and a bigger property and a garden to go with it. So we start discriminating against the poorest working class kids from birth onwards. We need housing as a right, not as a profit centre for those that can make money out of things. This is all what we can and ought to be able to achieve in our world, and that's why I was proud to lead the Labour Party and put forward the manifestos that we did in 2017 and 2019. But I tell you this, when you rattle the cage of the richest and most powerful in our land, they do not like it. They do not like it one bit. And I have to say a huge thank you to the people of this community, my closest friends and comrades and allies, and particularly Laura, my wife, and my children, for the support that they have given during what has often been very difficult times when we've been under the cosh of abuse. But our job is not any stress that's placed on me, it's the stress of trying to bring up children in an overcrowded flat, the stress of being a triage nurse in a hospital when you haven't got enough beds to put people in, the stress of a mental health worker that can't find somewhere to put somebody when they're going through a very bad episode. Those are the stresses we create